How do we know that we're actually living in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? I mean, there's no escaping its influence. It seems to be everywhere. And so it has kind of hard to pinpoint exactly what it is about these stories that have us so captivated. However, if we really want to unpack the reason for their widespread appeal, we may find that the answers lie in some of our deepest, darkest psychological struggles. We do want to need to look much further than ourselves to see the power of the stories told by Marvel. Welcome back, everyone! Here, we're going to be unpacking the traumas that all of the Avengers are hiding. So let's get into it. Number 1, Tony Stark, Iron Man. He is the richest man in the world and has everything he could ever ask for at his fingertips. But what about the things that money just can't buy? What happens when your trauma is more than money can fix? Well, we learned in the first Iron Man movie how he got his iconic suit after being kidnapped and almost killed by a group of terrorists. He uses the suit to escape, but he also builds a new persona for himself, one that allows him to face his fears head-on. However, as the series progresses, we learn that this persona comes with its own baggage. In Captain America Civil War, Tony is haunted by the faces of those who died in the Battle of New York. This is because he feels responsible for causing the battle in the first place due to his decision to reveal Loki as scepter to the world. When he goes on to fight against the Avengers, he's even more traumatized. As a result, he creates the Iron Spider. This shows that Tony isn't afraid of getting hurt or dying, but he is afraid of losing control. Even though he may have been trying to stop others from dying, he was also struggling with his own internal demons. The good news is that he eventually overcame them thanks to Pepper Potts' help. She showed him that it was okay to let go and that letting go would save everyone, especially himself. By forgiving himself for the past, Tony was able to move forward and become a better hero. Next, we have number 2, Steve Rogers, Captain America. How does a frail young man become the strongest Avenger? Well, it all comes down to psychology. Steve Rogers was a scrawny guy who dreamed of becoming a superhero like those he read about in comic books. But despite his small stature, he had a big heart. In fact, he was willing to sacrifice himself to protect others even before he became Captain America. In the first Captain America movie, we see that Steve was willing to take an experimental serum that could turn him into a super soldier, simply because it would allow him to defend his country. However, it didn't come without its own set of challenges. After the serum was injected into him, he became incredibly strong, but it also left him traumatized. For example, when he fought against the Red Skull, he kept having flashbacks to his childhood. These were likely triggered by the Skull's use of weapons such as guns and knives, which reminded Steve of when his father used to beat him and his brother. In addition to this, he also experienced feelings of guilt and shame. This was because he felt like he was unworthy of being a super soldier, and that he didn't deserve the serum. Thankfully, he was able to overcome these traumas thanks to the help of Peggy Carter. She showed him that even though he may have had a rough childhood, he still deserved love and happiness. Because of her support, Steve was able to become the hero we know and love today. Next, we have number 3, Bruce Banner, the Hulk. Did you know that Bruce Banner has dissociative disorder? Dissociative disorder is a mental condition that causes people to lose touch with reality. It's usually triggered by stress and trauma. Bruce Banner is a prime example of someone who experiences this. In the Incredible Hulk movie, we see that Bruce was traumatized after accidentally killing his father as a child. Because of this, he became very ashamed of his strength and tried to hide it from everyone. However, whenever he would get stressed out, his mind would block out and he would transform into the Hulk. The Hulk is basically Bruce's alter ego that represents all the anger and rage he has been suppressing for years. In a way, you could say that the Hulk is like Bruce's shadow self. This is the part of ourselves that contains all the negative traits we don't want to acknowledge. In Jungian psychology, the shadow self is seen as both good and bad. On one hand, it's bad because it contains all the evil and negative aspects of our personality. But on the other hand, it's good because it also contains all the positive and creative aspects. Ultimately, Bruce learns to accept both sides of himself and embrace his inner Hulk. By doing this, he becomes a better hero and is able to save the day. Number 4. Thor. Thor is one of the most powerful Avengers. But even gods aren't immune to trauma. In Thor Ragnarok, we see that Thor was traumatized by the death of his mother. This caused him to become very angry and vengeful, which led to him nearly destroying Asgard. However, in the end, he was able to forgive himself and move on. Thor is a prime example of someone who suffers from survivor's remorse. This is a feeling of guilt or shame that one feels after surviving a traumatic event when others did not. In Thor's case, he felt guilty for surviving the destruction of Asgard when so many innocent people died. To make matters worse, he was also angry at himself for not being able to save his mother. All these negative feelings started to consume him and turn him into a vengeful god. However, in the end, he was able to let go of his anger and move forward. Thor realized that it was his fault that his mother died, and that he could unblame himself for something he could uncontrol. With this newfound acceptance, Thor became a better leader and was able to unite the people of Asgard once again. Number 5. Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow. Natasha Romanoff is a trained assassin. But even deadly spies have their breaking points. In Avengers Endgame, we see that Natasha was traumatized by the loss of her sister. This caused her to become very detached and isolated, which made it difficult for her to trust anyone. However, in the end, she was able to let go of her grief and move on. Natasha's story is a prime example of how trauma can affect even the strongest of people. As a spy, she's used to being in control and having everything under her thumb. But when she lost her sister, she felt helpless. This was a traumatic experience that left her feeling broken and shattered. However, Natasha is a strong and resilient woman who was able to overcome her grief. She became one of the most valuable members of the Avengers. Number 6. Clint Barton, Hawkeye. Hawkeye is known for being one of the best archers in the world, but even skilled marksmen have their breaking points. In Avengers Endgame, we see that Clint was traumatized by the loss of his family. This caused him to become very reckless and dangerous, which put him at odds with the other Avengers. However, in the end, he was able to forgive himself and move on. Clint's story is a prime example of how trauma can cause even the most level-headed person to snap. As a superhero, he's used to staying calm and focused so that he can hit his target. But when he lost his family, he became overwhelmed with grief. This caused him to make some rash decisions that put him at odds with the other Avengers. However, Clint is a hero through and through, and in the end, he was able to overcome his grief and return to the team. Now that you've reached the end of this video, I have a question for you. Which Avenger do you think is the most traumatized? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and share with a friend. Thanks for watching!